Could your daily routine be full of hormone disruptors? There are more than 1,000 hormone disruptors living rent-free in our environment right now. In our food, our water, the air we breathe, the clothes we wear, our skincare, they all mess with our hormones. The good news is we don't have to suffer through it anymore because now we have Hormone Harmony, a formula made only with herbal ingredients that are shown to reduce hormonal symptoms of women of all ages. Since I've been using Hormone Harmony, I have felt more balanced. And other women feel the same way. The biggest benefit, they say, is feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews. And there are over 30,000 reviews for Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code DATEABLE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DATEABLE for 15% off today.
Armoire makes getting dressed easy. With a clothing rental membership from Armoire, build the perfect wardrobe with brands that are high quality, unique, and recommended just for you. All you have to do is take a 5-minute style quiz and select items from your dynamic personalized closet. The styles show up at your door in as little as 2 days. Then when you're ready for new clothes, just swap them out for more new-to-you styles. Now, I went on a girls' trip to Santa Fe recently, and I rented all of my outfits from Armoire. It was so much fun putting together a mix of casual and formal looks, and my favorite was this pair of white wide-legged jeans from Paige that went well with everything. Now, I wouldn't normally own anything white because I can be kind of clumsy, but with Armoire, I just ship it back and they'll take care of keeping the pants in pristine condition. Right now, our listeners can give Armoire a try and get up to 50% off their first month. That's up to $125 off. Just visit armoire.style/dateable. That is armoire.style, spelled ARMOIRE.style/DATEABLE to get up to 50% off your first month and never worry about what to wear again. Try Armoire today. Hi, I'm Yue Xu.
And I'm Julie Krafchick.
We're active daters turned dating insiders.
Here to dive into everything modern dating and relationships.
Welcome to Dateable. Hello, friends.
Welcome to another episode of Dateable.
I hate to be so basic and talk about weather, but this weather is driving me crazy. Is it raining up north?
No, it's been beautiful, actually.
Dying. I'm dying. It was like 80 last week, and now it's raining in LA. It's going to rain for the rest of the week. It's driving me nuts.
When you started, I hate to be so basic. I did not know where that convo was going.
I hate when people talk about the weather, but today I'm a weather girl because I will be basic.
So I remember I did this girls' trip with some of my first friends in San Francisco. It was like a group of 5 of us. And for some reason, it was like pretty late. We had had a few too many drinks. And we found this like, how basic are you quiz?
Oh, I remember this.
I don't even know how it like circulated. And my friend Tara ended up being the most basic. And at that time, she was like super, I don't know, like hipster. Like she was in her cool era. And she'll laugh if she heard that. But if she was like the last one that you would think would be basic, but she scored the highest, and we just like kept ripping on her for being so basic.
In my interactions with her, I would not say she's basic.
No, but she loved pumpkin spice lattes, leggings, a lot of the things that were on the basic list.
Yeah.
Secret basic.
I see. Like in terms of interests, but like in terms of her personality and the way she presents herself, not very basic at all, but I get it. I get it.
That's why it was so funny, because like if she was just basic, we'd be like, oh, okay. It makes sense.
Of course she is.
Or you wouldn't rip on someone because you'd be like, oh yeah, they really are basic.
Which kind of reminds me, I went to a birthday picnic this weekend and my friend, a boy, brought White Claw and everybody at the party was like, oh my gosh, throwback to being basic. And I was like, oh, I really can't remember the last time someone brought White Claw to a party. It's been a while.
Well, the good news for everyone here, this episode is anything but basic. So this is our basic talk. We're getting it out now.
Yeah. If anything, all the trends, all the things that we like are socialized by society. And even with attraction is socialized. There are always trends in what makes someone attractive. But there's also underlying psychology and science behind what makes someone attractive, how we get into relationships, what our relationship dynamics are that are sometimes socialized and some of it is biological.
And just for the record, I'm not saying that this is basic, but I do like how our guest today, we have a returning guest, our number one episode of all time. It was with Paul Eastwick. It was The Science of Attraction. So we'll link that and make sure to listen if you haven't yet. He studies attraction and close relationships at UC Davis and runs their attraction lab. We also had the pleasure of having his mentor, Eli Finkel, who's a professor at Northwestern with a PhD in social psychology, and he's the director of the Relationships and Motivation Lab. So these are clearly not basic people, but what I love about them is they have taken all their knowledge and brought it down to all of our levels to talk about rom-coms. And again, I'm not saying rom-coms are basic, but it's more basic than maybe their in-depth studies.
Right, because they have a brand new podcast called Love Factually, and they dissect our favorite rom-coms based on these like psychology facts, I guess you would call it, based on science and psychology, based on their studies. Like, why else would you get a PhD, right? If not to dissect some rom-coms.
It's definitely their outlet, their fun outlet, they said.
But they've definitely mentioned some facts that I did not know before. Very surprising for anybody who's interested in just the psychology of human dynamics. We always find this topic so interesting, how we connect and relate to each other. But there were some mic drops in this one.
Oh, yeah. After we got off the interview, Yue and I were both like, we need Paul and Eli to be dateable regulars because they are just amazing. So if you are interested, you know, if you've watched maybe a few too many rom-coms or even real life scenarios that have happened to you and you're like, why the F did that happen? This episode explains so much. And I think it's really fun to just go deeper and think about things and talk about it on that more sociological level. In addition to, it can actually give really good insight into your own love life as well.
It's such a great conversation starter with your friends, your dates, people around you. I mean, you should listen to this with other people because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we definitely make sure that we hit some of the big ones of, you know, love at first sight, for instance, opposites attract, red flags as romantic traits, grand gestures, you know, all the things that seem to come up in rom-coms that we either love or hate or subconsciously bring into our own dating lives.
And my favorite topic, can matchmakers actually predict your perfect match?
Yes. So many good nuggets in this one, and we're so excited to bring it to you all.
And we actually reference Paul quite a bit in our book, How to Be Dateable, because he had the most popular episode on our show, but also like, I think for many years after that episode aired, I tried so hard to understand a lot of the research that he's done too. It's kind of a mindfuck in some ways, like if you try to understand some of the stats that he's been researching, but I really love what he's been doing because it's just demystifying human connection.
Yeah, we really emphasized him in chapter 2, the settling paradox, where we talk about like your type, because he had a lot of really interesting studies of how we grossly underestimate what's important to us and what we think are traits that matter ultimately don't end up being them. So I love that part where we reference a lot of his work there. And then he also talked about just like the key of a successful partnership of building microcultures and creating a lot of these dynamics that could in theory be created with anyone had the right mindsets come to the table in the first place. So a lot of stuff that maybe counters a lot of ways of beliefs that we have that he's been able to pull out through his studies.
For your friends, Julie, who luckily fell into healthy, successful relationships, do you think they were taught a lot of this stuff or like knew a lot about psychology of connection when they were little or somehow was exposed to it? Or do you think they just fell into a dynamic that works for them?
I think No, I would guess that most people haven't. But where I think that actually might have been a leg up for them is a lot of them actually weren't in the dating scene for a long time.
Yeah.
Or if they were at a phase of it where it wasn't the way it is today. And that's not to say that people that are dating in today's world are like, don't have a shot at love. I'm not saying that at all. But what I do think is that people that are in it, in the thick of it now, maybe have to unlearn more than people that maybe just never were exposed in the first place. So that's where I think these types of convos are really important, because it brings us back to a lot of the fundamentals, similar to how our book does. When people ask about it, I'm always like, we're not going to be teaching you like these new tricks and tactics. A lot of it is just unraveling and getting back to like the core of being authentic and having intentionality in the way we date. So I think that is where I would say it's more important for people to unravel. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like some of my friends who fell into great relationships are because they're a little bit naive to this stuff. Like sometimes when you're exposed to too much, that you start dissecting your behaviors and your partner's behaviors, and then you get in the rabbit hole of overanalyzing. But where I do think this episode will be helpful is not for people to go in and psychoanalyze everybody they're dating and psychoanalyze every relationship they've ever had, but it's to pique their interest and curiosity in getting to know new people, not explaining their behavior, but understanding people are absolutely fascinating. And hopefully this will empower you and inspire you to go out there and meet more people.
I think a big part of it is that we're in the age of information, right? Like there's all this stuff that's so readily accessible to us that maybe some of our friends that met people 10 years ago even didn't have that access to. And the way I kind of view it is like it's already happening. We're already flooded with data and info for the most part if you're in today's world. And especially if you're trying to navigate a big life moment like dating or finding love or finding the right relationship, there's no way to like tune it all out necessarily. But what I like to say that like hopefully people that listen to this podcast religiously, the people that read our book, is you start to know yourself so well. And you also know how this stuff is actually getting in your way and hindering progress in some ways. That just getting all info isn't necessarily leading you to the right path. It's up to you to be like, this is what serves me and this doesn't. Like I use the example with dating apps all the time. For example, the way dating apps are designed, it's meant to keep you on the hook. It's meant to keep you going. I had to counter a lot of those urges by removing notifications, by being like, okay, I'm going to stop swiping until I talk to at least 5 people. Stuff like that, that's like countering the way things are moving. I think that is really the world that we're in to rise above it.
So maybe it's really taking this information to set you free versus being stuck in analysis paralysis. Because a lot of this is like, if you feel like you've been stuck in a certain pattern or stuck on someone, we actually have a really great discussion within this episode. Is like, can you be stuck on the idea of someone? Or is that really the reality? Hopefully, this information will just liberate you from all those obstacles standing in your way.
I love that way that you put it, of liberate, because I do think it doesn't really serve anyone to just psychoanalyze every last thing and learn and learn and learn. It's like, how do I see that this actually isn't really working for me? It's not doing anything for me. That's the real liberation.
Ah, so good. Such a good episode.
So liberated. Okay, well, I guess that's a call out. If you haven't bought the book yet, make sure to go pick up How to Be Dateable at bookstores everywhere, but also online, howtobedateable.com. I saw you posted the Spotify link, or was it Audible? I couldn't tell. I know you posted one to our story.
Yeah, Libby. It's an audiobook
Libby, okay.
Borrow on Libby.
Awesome. So yeah, the audiobook, I feel like people are just like going through that audiobook so fast, but it's really great to hear the people that are listening to the audiobook and then reading it. I'm a sucker for a good book. I love just like reading in bed before I go to sleep. And it might take me a while to get through because I read like, 10 pages and then I fall asleep. It's also a great hack to fall asleep really quickly. is to read. So whatever your method is, we got you. Or you could do multiple. We loved hearing people that are like, I got audiobook, Kindle, I got the hardcover, like I take notes of the hardcover, and then I have the Kindle to like take with me. So whatever works for you, we support as many or as few, but just get something.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to be left behind. Yeah. This new wave of dating.
There's some slight differences between the audiobook and the hardcover. You might be able to uncover those differences if you get both.
Oh my God, I love that. And keep the comments coming. I love how people are now referring to themselves as archetypes. Like in the Facebook group, we got a comment that was like, Maverick 10, Achiever 5 over here. I might be butchering what they actually said, but I love it. It's showing where you're coming from.
Even my man friend now, he'll call me out. He'd be like, you're getting a little mavericky on me.
Yes, that's great.
I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm getting a little mavericky. Just so let me do my thing. He's like, okay, you maverick out. You maverick out for a few minutes. Come back when you're ready.
Oh, and it's like you're in thinker mode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Love it.
So good.
Okay, well, we might as well just get into it because it's such a great episode. But before we do, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. Who doesn't love the good things in life? And even though I enjoy a little luxury, it doesn't mean I can always afford it until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for all luxury items. I'm constantly wearing their Mongolian cashmere sweaters. I now have it in green and in tan, and I am obsessed. And if Mongolian sweaters aren't your thing, they have a huge range of high quality items at prices within reach. Washable silk tops and dresses, organic cotton sweaters, and even 14 karat gold jewelry. And the best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories and cut the cost of the middleman and pass the savings on to us. So give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable. Who doesn't love the good things in life? And even though I enjoy a little luxury, it doesn't mean I can always afford it until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for all luxury items. I'm constantly wearing their Mongolian cashmere sweaters. I now have it in green and in tan, and I am obsessed. And if Mongolian sweaters aren't your thing, they have a huge range of high quality items at prices within reach. Washable silk tops and dresses, organic cotton sweaters, and even 14 karat gold jewelry. And the best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories and cut the cost of the middleman and pass the savings on to us. So give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/dateable for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/dateable to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/dateable. Okay, let's hear it from Paul and Eli.
Welcome back to Dateable, Paul. And welcome for the first time, Eli.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me back and letting me bring this guy along.
I don't know if you know, Paul, but your episode was actually our #1 most listened to episode ever.
Nice.
Whoa. Well, I will try to match that. That's not going to be easy.
Also, you've been quoted in our book, and I think Julie and I have had hours-long discussions about the takeaways from that episode we did with you.
Oh, cool.
There was a lot of stats that I think had implications that we want to break down again for our listeners because it was just such a great podcast. But today, you get to bring your friend to work day.
Yeah, seriously.
We can go even deeper.
Yeah.
Everybody, to be clear, Eli was my graduate advisor. So I'm definitely enjoying this joke, and we can continue it.
And the two of you have a new podcast. It's called Love Factually, which I just love the name. And it's all about, analyzing rom-coms and romantic films, like kind of debunking a lot with the science of close relationships. So we're excited to bring that. We went from science of attraction to science of relationships, and we're excited to get into it.
Love Actually is one of the worst rom-coms ever made.
Okay.
For the record.
We have not covered it yet, to be clear. I feel like we're going to do it at some point.
Can I come on to talk about it? I hate that movie so much.
It's so bewildering. I feel like there's like a good movie hiding in there, but actually Eli has a different take than me.
I love it. It's fun. It's a fun movie.
We're already starting your episode on our show.
Yeah, you're right. We got to save it for the Love Actually
We'll save it. But I just want to say that for the record. It's just seriously the worst rom-com.
It is divisive.
Yes.
So I guess maybe that's a good starting point. Like, what got you into this in the first place? Like, why did you think it'd be fun to break down these movies to reveal what's factual or not?
So, Eli and I spend most of our time talking about scientific stuff like, oh, we should run a study to look at XYZ. Oh, how is this paper coming up? Okay, most people would not be interested in listening in on those conversations. But sometimes we bore ourselves, and instead we talk about movies, and we talk a lot about, like, one thing you think about a lot as a scientist is like, how can I, make this work more accessible for a general audience? There are many different ways scientists can do that, but we'd sort of realized that we were kind of in a rut when it came to communicating the science more broadly. And I was basically like, well, I think actually we should just like talk about movies, but like kind of sneak in the science as like, act like make the movies a Trojan horse, and we'd have fun doing it. And so then we were kind of off to the races from there, I guess. But Eli, what's your memory?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Each of us goes on a run, you in California, me just outside of Chicago, and we talk about all this stuff. But one of the things we talk about a lot is movies, and it turns out there's lots of movies about relationships, and those movies about relationships have messages that they send to the public about how relationships work, and some of those messages are spot on, that is aligned with the scientific evidence, and some really are not. So we thought this podcast would be a very fun way to provide a public service that basically like allows us to fact check Hollywood.
Now I'm thinking about all the movies. I think they've all gotten relationships wrong. So now let's start with who do you think has gotten it right? Name one or two of your favorite movies that you think they got it right.
We've reviewed a bunch. I think we've done 16 episodes so far, but we're putting them out at a decent clip at the moment. And every movie we give 2 ratings to. One is like how good the movie was from 1 to 5 stars, but we also give it a second rating called the Rust Bolt. It's named after my advisor, and it basically is a way of assessing the extent to which the messages in the relationship align with the evidence. So I submit to you La La Land. Right?
Okay.
This is obviously
I love
not,
that movie.
It's wonderful, but independent of it being a wonderful movie, we can consider how realistic it is in terms of the message it's sending. Now, let's be clear that it's a musical where people do like dance routines because they're stuck in LA traffic. So the movie itself is, of course, a fantasy and a fiction, but nonetheless, there are messages underneath those fantasy fictional elements. And both of us, I think, Paul, gave that one 5 Rust Bolts. I think we thought that it basically got the messages about how relationships work pretty much spot on.
Well, when I said I love that movie, I think that is what I love, how realistic it is, that love isn't enough all the time. And with so many movies, it's like this big blowout fight and conflict, and then they get together and then the curtains roll and we don't see after. And I think that's the part that, with La La Land, they like hit the mark so well. And you see that like both of them are still okay, even if they're not together. And I think that part is just so realistic.
And I think there are some other movies, too, that do a realistic job of capturing part of the process.
Okay.
So even if they don't capture the full arc of the relationship, like La La Land does, they do good at what they set out to do. And I'm just thinking about, like, the Before trilogy, right? Like, each of those is a snapshot of a relationship at a particular moment in time. We've covered Before Sunrise, and that's a beautiful portrayal of what it's like to do the rare thing, which is fall deeply for somebody in a span of about 24 hours. So it's like the premise is very, very, very uncommon, but the experiences within that, I think, are spot on. We're watching this thing that doesn't happen in real life very often, but it's capturing that thing realistically.
And you only do films, not TV shows, right?
Yeah, that's where we are at this point. I think Eli would like us to do TV shows, and I'm like, oh my God.
I wouldn't normally say TV shows, but I just keep thinking about Nobody Wants This and how realistic that show is in portrayal of real adult relationships.
Right. A lot of what I liked about that show is that it shows us that a lot of the conflict is coming from outside the pair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's like all of these other forces are impinging on us. Mm-hmm. You get that in some movies too. I think The Notebook was one example where we see that theme over and over again, right? The disapproving families and how things go sideways.
What about the ones that really don't meet the mark, that like completely miss it and just really give us unrealistic expectations?
That is a great question, and I'm happy to throw some movies under the bus right now.
Please.
I do want to say that pretty much every movie, at least every movie that we've seen thus far, gets some stuff right and some stuff wrong, and that's built into our podcast. Every episode of the podcast has a certain structure. And the meat of it is, what did the movie get right? What did the movie get wrong? We also talk about ideas in the movie that we wish relationship scientists actually studied. But nonetheless, on average, movies can get it more right or more wrong. And I have to say that so far I've been a little disappointed in the teen romance genre. So some of what you see, so for example, in 10 Things I Hate About You, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character just instantaneously falls in love, right? Sees the girl across the room and he is just completely smitten and pretty much stays that way the whole time. And so this conceit that love at first sight is the way these things happen. It's a theme that you see in these movies, a trope that you see in some of these movies, and it is not false. It's not like it can never happen. It's just not usually the way these things happen. More often than not, we fall in love with people that we have already known, people that emerged from our social network or whom we met through friends of friends. And even in the era of online dating and the apps, that's still true. That's one of the tropes that you see in some movies, especially sort of the teen romance movie, that I think doesn't align especially well with the science.
Well, what about love at first sight? Are there stats around that?
Love at first sight is definitely a thing that can happen. My guess is that a substantial proportion of people will have experienced it at some point in their lives. At least the experience of like infatuation at first sight. Like I looked at this person and I knew I just had to talk to them. Mm-hmm. Now let's take instead the subset of pairings that actually become romantic or sexual in some way, shape, or form. So now we're going to look at the things that are successful. When you look at that grouping, it's something like 70% of people will say that they were friends first, that they were friends before that relationship formed. And we've seen similar kinds of stats if you kind of just look at sexual relationships too, right? Things that maybe weren't like a full-blown romantic relationship, but was like a hookup or a fling. But again, what is usually happening is that these relationships are growing out of people's social networks gradually. The fascinating thing is that, online dating has changed this somewhat. But I think what people often miss is that even a typical online dating sequence, you'd be getting to know that person over a course of maybe weeks or a month before like finally it feels like the relationship is in gear. And so it's not super uncommon that people in that situation would be like, oh, you're like, this is somebody that I am friends with and I'm getting to know them. And I am intrigued, but we're not at like full-blown romantic relationship yet. So there is a launching period for the vast majority of romantic relationships.
So when you say friends, it doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to be like your childhood friends since like elementary school that you fall for, but someone that you've just built that like rapport with that you don't just see immediately or you go on one date with and you're like, I know.
Right. Friends can have a lot of meanings. Yeah. And to some extent, this is something that Eli and I argue about from time to time, because I find this idea very intuitive that you can know somebody for a very long time before falling for them. But I feel like, Eli, you have a different take on some of this.
Yeah, I mean, the discussions we've had about this have been more personal than scientific. And it is true that I find it difficult to fathom, speaking from a personal point of view here, the idea that there would be someone in my life that I had no interest or attraction to at all, and then over time had a series of experiences together that then led to attraction. But I am aware that there are weirdos in the world.
Like a little. Like, I don't know, and then the light hits them just so. And
Sure. Like if it's
certain angle.
like
I feel like that was like all of UA's experiences, but I'm with you, Eli. I've never really had that happen. Or like I can think of one instance and it never went anywhere. It wasn't like a relationship.
Yeah, it's like it either happens or it doesn't. I never thought it would happen. I can say my current partner, I've known him for 8 years now, never had attraction towards him because we met in a professional setting too. So contextually, it was like not right. But it just, through a series of events, through a series of different angles of seeing him, and through a series of conversations that showed a different side of him, I'm very much in love with him. But if you told me this 8 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, hell no. There's no way.
Yeah. So I do feel like some of these friends first relationships are the experience of, is there something here? Is there something here? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Over the course of a month or two.
Yeah.
And some of them are more like what you had just described, right? So it's a heterogeneous grouping. But the thing that's uncommon is like, nice to meet you, let's go. That's the thing that's not common.
And that's actually one of the biggest problems we see with dating apps is that's the expectation that you show up and you're going to know, like, is this going to be my life partner or not? And it's just not realistic.
Right.
Like, I know, like, I met my partner on a dating app, but I will say it was kind of like what you're talking about, Paul. Like, I wasn't like, oh my God, I know this is the one, but I'm like, I like this person. I want to get to know them more. And I wouldn't say like we had a deep friendship. Clearly, we met on a dating app, but a friendship was building.
Yeah.
So I see the difference.
That's one of the reasons why Paul and I wanted to do Love Factually, right? That is, these messages are in the movies. And if what the movies are telling us is love is something that you feel right away or it's hopeless, that's the sort of love at first sight conceit that we see in some of these movies. Here's a consequence of that. We go on a date with somebody we met on one of the apps. And after about 45 minutes, we've had our coffee and now we go home. And often what's going to happen is you're going to be like, I don't know, he was kind of nice and there was maybe whatever, but I don't feel this thing in my fingertips. And that's really not the way it's supposed to be. And so I'm not going to go on the second date. Paul, you've delved deep into the evidence, right? In terms of how likely is it that if you are kind of wishy-washy on somebody at first, that you ultimately could be attracted to them on a second date or vice versa?
So this is some data. What we're tracking is people's crushes over time. So it's not in an online dating context exactly, but we're kind of extrapolate to that. So these are people, they're getting to know potential partners over a series of weeks. And what you see is something that I think we'd all find pretty intuitive, which is that the first impression is a little bit unstable, okay? So you first meet somebody. What are the odds that that's going to carry over to your second, third, fourth, fifth impression? And the answer is like a little. But by the time you get to like the third impression, things are getting now pretty stable. And so I kind of like the advice of like, if you're going to do the online dating thing, boy, does it pay to like stick around for date 3.
Yeah.
Because after date 1, it really could go dramatically in the other direction. By the time you get to date 3, it's diminishing returns for a while. Okay. People's opinions can, of course, change later. They often do.
Yeah.
But by the time you get to a third date, you've kind of hit this plateau of stability. And so that's a nice moment to assess, okay, do I want to keep investing into this one or do I want to try a different direction here?
I'm so glad you brought this up because we get this question all the time. And, you know, we've been kind of saying like, at least do the second date default, like because people are inherently awkward on the first date.
Yeah.
But what I love about this is one, it pushes it one more, but then it also gives people tangible research because you hear a lot of like dating advice being like, go on 1 date, go on 2, go on 3. But now we know like the science behind it. So when we actually get this question now, we're going to be like, look, we have scientific evidence that you need to go on 3 dates.
Right.
I want to be clear, too. It's not like what nobody has done is the truly random assignment, you know, which is like the gold standard in the science to try to understand whether something is really having a causal impact. But what I'd want to do is be like, you must go on 5 dates with this person and with this person and with this person, right? And then you'd really see where it starts to tip. So this is our best inference from, I think, the closest data that we have.
We hear this a lot, like there's just nothing there. And our advice typically has been like, okay, don't waste either of your time if like there is like you are not having a good time at all or there is zero attraction. Like, have you seen evidence that that can turn around, or is that more of like, okay, stick to that?
these are all cases where there's at least like a middling level of interest to start. Yeah. And so if you get people totally crashing after the first one, although Eli, I feel like that would be in there. Maybe that would be caught by it.
Well, no, for that study, I think to be included, they had to sort of list the person as a possible crush, right?
Oh, I see.
But they had to keep reporting. So if you list them once and crash, you're still in the data set, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it means there was at least some level of interest at some point. I mean, look, we don't have an answer to this one, but I wouldn't object. If I heard that you folks were offering feedback to people that said, look, if it's just flatlined after the first date, go and find a different person. Just because, time and resources are finite, and it seems likely to me that that could be a long shot.
But you know what I wish existed and was a thing that was easier for people to do, and to bring it back to the movies here for a second, we can learn a lot from When Harry Met Sally. Because when they aren't really into each other, what do? They try to set each other up with their friends.
Yeah.
Okay?
Good point.
So how cool would it be if we were able to better take the lackluster dating app dates, the things that didn't go that great, and be like, okay, but I got a friend for you to meet here.
You did that.
Yeah, I did that with my first serious boyfriend. We met on Match. I didn't feel like there was an attraction, but I thought he was a great guy. Tried to set him up with my best friend. But in the process of setting him up with my best friend, I fell for him.
What?
So then we
ended up dating.
Exactly what happened. And we ended up dating for 5 years. So it's crazy because I think in me describing him to her, in that process, it made me realize what an amazing partner he would be.
That was your moment of clueless? You were butt crazy in love with Josh.
Yeah.
Yes, he was my Josh.
But was he your brother?
Stepbrother.
Maybe half. No, just kidding. Yeah. But he went away for a week. And that's when it was so clear to me I missed him. And so then that week I told my best friend, I was like, I don't think this is going to happen because I think I'm keeping him for me. And she's like, all right. Whatever.
You figure out yourself there.
Yeah, she's like, okay. All right, let's what is this about? But we ended up dating for 5 years, and I still think it's crazy. But in the time of me trying to set him up with her, I had to hang out with him a lot to really suss him out. And I can't really count how many times we hung out, but I was part of this MTV pilot like 15 years ago called 12 Dates. And there was some research backing that it takes 12 dates to fall in love with someone. Is there anything like that you've come across? I don't even know where this research came from.
Paul's face.
I don't know what that is. I mean,
sounds like a good entertainment spin.
Yeah, I mean, if it works for a reality show, then why not? To bring up the Before trilogy again, so I don't know if all your listeners will be familiar with Before Sunrise and Before Sunset and Before Midnight, but we've already covered the first of those, and we'll be covering the second one soon, and then eventually the third one. And that depicts something that seems plausible, I think, to both of us. That is, they meet on a train. There's this urgent external time constraint because he has to catch a flight the next morning out of Vienna. So they just walk around the city and, basically get to know each other. That's the movie, right? It's a very talky movie, and they're just getting to know each other and basically falling in love with each other over that period of time. And nothing seems false about that. So that for sure is something that happens. It is in fact rare. As we've been talking about earlier, this is not the normative thing and really would take unusual circumstances, like we met and then we have to leave town tomorrow sort of thing, would supercharge some of this emotional intimacy stuff that would usually happen on the order of weeks and months into a relatively small number of hours. So I don't see any reason why you'd have to assume that it takes a certain number of dates to fall in love. 12 seems shockingly arbitrary to me. I doubt there's actual science behind it. But the growth of intimacy over time is real. And some of the movies do a great job of depicting how over time I disclose a little bit more. I'm willing to make myself a little bit more vulnerable to you. As a response, you face a choice. Are you willing to sort of meet me there? If I've just disclosed something private, are you willing to disclose something private or intimate back to me? And this escalation process where each of us is just ever so slightly increasing the amount of intimacy that the two of us have is really how relationships grow on average. You can put that in the supercharger in a case like before sunrise, but that's not the typical time frame.
So I think a lot of our listeners can say like, okay, I don't believe in love at first sight. This is something that's in the movies. Like, I get that. But then a lot of times I think the consequence of it seeps through. Like we were talking about earlier, people go on that first date and expect the fireworks, they expect the spark. And then if it doesn't happen, they question everything. Like what you were saying, Eli, is like it needs to build. There needs to be some momentum. And maybe that could happen in the first night, but it doesn't always happen that way. How do you I guess, what does relationship science tell us about compatibility being built over time?
This is one of our favorite topics. So we are big believers in compatibility. We think compatibility is very important for explaining why some pairings work and some pairings don't. But there is a common misconception that compatibility derives from the stable features of one person and the other person, right? That Eli and our relationship is what it is because of stable things that are true about me and stable things that are true about him. And if that were true, boy, wouldn't that be convenient, because then we could just fill out some questionnaires and do some magic hocus pocus and we could figure out who all the great pairs are, add some science fiction, and we're off to the races.
Hey, Paul, before you get to the alternative, I should say a useful metaphor here is to think of yourself as a puzzle piece, right? So really you're a piece with a certain shape.
Yeah.
And really what the job is to date around until you find somebody that has a shape that fits you. That's this.
I like that.
Yeah. That's this model of what compatibility is that is intuitive. It's underlying a lot of the matchmaking algorithms. eHarmony most famously talked about, well, you just need to find people that are similar to you. And we know that based on information that exists before the two of you have ever met. But Paul, I interrupted. I mean, we now have a whole lot of evidence related to this, and it looks like that's not in general how compatibility does work.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah. What is compatibility?
Yeah. So compatibility comes more from what two people create and or discover together over a stretch of time. And there are many different ways you can think about how that process unfolds. I often talk about two people creating patterns in their relationships, right? The things that they do together that build closeness that actually would not have made any sense in any prior relationship they might have had. It can also be things as small as in-jokes, pet names, other kinds of weird norms or customs that people build together.
Nice. Good throw.
Yeah.
So in my world, I talk about this as the microculture of the relationship. And this is huge. It's the little stuff that we build together, right? The jokes that we refer back to, the how is it that we sort of initiate intimacy together? I mean, very few of us are like, I'm kind of in the mood for sex. Are you feeling in a sexy mood right now? It's usually some sort of subtle thing that we have. You probably don't transfer the exact same thing from, your last girlfriend to this new girlfriend. There's these norms and rituals that you develop in the course of the relationship. And this is the foundation of compatibility. And it speaks to another issue that some of the movies really get wrong. Clueless, for example, is among the movies that get this idea wrong, which is that some people have good mate value and others don't. That there are 10s and there are 2s.
Yes.
And again, it's not that there's no truth whatsoever to this. There is some truth to this idea, especially on a first meeting. That is, we can have a reasonably high agreement that John is hotter than Dave is, for example. That's true. But the question is, and Paul, you're the one who talks about people being able to dole out good relationships.
Right,
if you find
right.
one of those people, John's just somebody, anybody who can get John will have a happy marriage. And the reality is that's not true. It's a whole lot about compatibility. John is going to be able to build this sort of compatibility and make wife A happy, but wife B would never have been happy with him. And the reason why that is because people aren't over time 10s and 2s. The important thing is not to find somebody who is a catch, but to build between the two of you something where, regardless of what the next person thinks about your partner, you feel like your partner is in the 8, 9, 10 range. And that's a message that you really don't find much in these movies, but is the state of the evidence for how compatibility really works.
I want to dive into this even more, but before we do, let's take a quick break to hear from our partners.
Let's be honest, sometimes no matter how much you want to be in the mood, your mind and body just aren't on the same page. This episode is sponsored by Via, the brand behind the most loved THC libido gummy on the market, designed to enhance intimacy, heighten pleasure, and help you fully embrace the moment. Originally created as a limited edition Valentine's release, High Love was such a massive hit that Via made it a permanent part of their lineup. For the last 2 years, it's been helping adults enhance intimacy, heighten pleasure, and feel more connected than ever. These gummies are a hit for me as well, as I am so impressed by the powerful blend of cannabinoids and time-tested aphrodisiac herbs. The formula increases my blood flow, awakens my senses, and helps me fully embrace the moment. Now, if you're 21 and over, head to viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE to receive 15% off, free shipping on orders over $100, and if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice. That's VIIA hemp.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout. After you purchase, they ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and let them know that we sent you. Take your passion and pleasure to a whole new level with High Love from Via.
Did you know that an estimated 5 billion plastic hand soap cleaning bottles are thrown away each year? And if that's not bad enough, most cleaning formulas are 90% water, which is heavy to ship, leading to excess carbon emissions. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean you're used to. The idea is simple. They offer reliable cleaning products with a beautiful, cohesive design that looks great on your counter. Fill your reusable bottles with water, drop in the tablets, and wait for them to dissolve. I am obsessed with their laundry detergent because it is so easy to carry around and I never have to grab bulky cleaning supplies again on my grocery runs. Blueland is a special offer for listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/dateable. You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/dateable for 15% off. That's blueland.com/dateable to get 15% off.
March is Sleep Awareness Month, the perfect time to think about the quality of your sleep and how the mattress you choose can make all the difference. Avocado Green Mattress is committed to providing mattresses that not only help you sleep better, but also are healthier for you and the planet. Avocado mattresses promote better sleep through breathable, naturally temperature-regulating materials, which can improve overall well-being. No harmful chemicals, just healthy materials for a cleaner, safer sleep. And best yet, Avocado's committed to sustainability. Their mattresses are made from organic, eco-friendly materials that are good for both you and the planet. Plus, their mattresses are built to last, keeping more mattresses out of the landfill. Isn't it time to upgrade your mattress for you and the planet? Head to avocadomattress.com today and save up to 10% on certified organic mattresses. Dream of better. So if we were to translate that into online dating, can you gauge compatibility before you even meet up?
You know, something that might be interesting to your listeners is to put online dating in some sort of historical context. And Paul and I did a lot of work on this stuff back in the day. But broadly, we can think of 3 generations of online dating. The first one is basically once the internet launches, basically 1995, and Netscape Navigator comes out. And finally, you have, Web 1.0. And then right around the time that people are able to get online, you get Match.com, right? And the basic idea for Match.com at first was, oh my goodness, how amazing would it be if you could browse through hundreds or thousands of profiles and just find the one or the ones that are appealing to you and go on dates with those people. And literally, when I say thousands of people, that was what you'd get. I want, within 25 miles of this zip code, and you'd have all these options. There was an assumption there that you can actually tell not just like who has an attractive photo, that we can tell. We can tell that person has an attractive photo. There's some amount of agreement about that. But who's compatible with me? That is a better fit for me than for somebody else? Nothing. Basically nothing. And it's not like whoever said showing people thousands of profiles is a good way of helping them make decisions clearly knew nothing about decision science, because human cognition is really not meant to do that. So then you get this second wave. Only 5 years later, really, it launches with eHarmony in 2000. And instead of pitching themselves as like the supermarkets of love, come and browse the wares, they pitch themselves as the real estate agents of love. And what they say is like, wow, the terrain is fraught and it's unfamiliar. What you need is a guide and an expert. And they claimed, these sites, that they could build an algorithm that would select among these several thousand people and show you the 5 or 10 potential matches that would be uniquely compatible with you based on some information, usually in the form of a survey. Now, look, that's a terrific idea. And if it were true that stuff were accessible in advance, things that seem likely to be true, like we like people who are more similar to us, we like people who have personalities that complement our own. If those ideas turned out to be true, then those algorithms would have worked. But those ideas are not true, and those algorithms did not work. And so then you got this third generation, pretty much with the advent of the App Store, the second generation iPhone in 2008. And then people are swiping left and right. That was Tinder's innovation, really, but they're swiping left and right. And it adds back a level of spontaneity, at least in principle. So some people can use this to say like, okay, I'm out and it's a Saturday, and like, who's around? And at least in principle, you could actually meet up with someone spontaneously, which is not the normative way to do it, but for me, the most exciting.
Yeah.
The whole conceit was, let's just make this part as fast as possible so that you can get face-to-face and figure out with the algorithm between your ears, is there something here that you'd be willing to consider? And again, with regard to what we were discussing earlier, even if your algorithm between your ears is saying like, I'm feeling iffy, it would be reasonable to default to feeling iffy equals yes, second date.
I'm so glad you said this because it backs up a lot of the stuff we've been saying for a while. And you know, we look at it very similarly of like, it's an intro, and maybe is a yes. You really can't tell through the profile. I mean, from the conversation we had with you too, Paul, last time, I remember you talking about those stats and they stuck with us. But I'm glad that like people can hear this again and then from a scientific lens, because we hear all the time like, oh, we grew up in the same area, or we both like tennis, and that's just not compatibility. But if we want to take it like the next level, like the other side of it, I think like in rom-coms, this happens a lot. Opposites attract. What's your take on that side? Because like, I guess, is there a line? Like, do you need some similarities in terms of lifestyle and upbringing and I guess hobbies and ways of being? Or is it like your polar opposite? Is that good too?
Well, here, you can line people up based on their similarities with the hope that the more similarities you find, the more two people will hit it off, right?
Yeah.
And that was an assumption for a very long time. And it turned out similarity attraction doesn't really work that way. Okay. Complementarity attraction, the idea that, oh, but if I meet my opposite, then I'll fall for them. That also doesn't work. There's basically no ability to predict whatsoever from the amount that two people match on the things that they could describe about themselves, right? Their personality, their interests, their preferences. It's not going to do that much.
I see.
But what people can do is convert almost anything they have in common into something that they could build a relationship around. And so, you know, you mentioned like the tennis example earlier. It would be very possible for two people to then perceive that that is an important similarity that they happen to share, and then build a culture of their relationship around that. And then it could become very important. If you imagine me then taking the tennis away, that could be absolutely tragic for the relationship. But there would have been no way to predict a priori before you two had met that tennis was going to be the thing that was going to connect you, right? And so this is why any relationship building requires some amount of exploration. It's not what do we have in common, but what do we have in common that we're kind of motivated to like build something around this. And you just kind of got to get in there and try. It's remarkably hard to forecast.
We do see this also, I think, depicted pretty well in some of the movies. So 500 Days of Summer.
I love that movie.
Here we have Gordon Levitt again. And, you know, he's just obsessed with summer. And he just sort of can't believe how much stuff they have in common. And his main confidant is his like 12-year-old sister. And she says something like, look, you know, just because you and some girl have a bunch of stupid stuff in common, like, why does that mean you have to be compatible? And what's wild about that movie, at the risk of spoiling it, is there is a second girl for Tom named Autumn, who, of course, as in our seasonal calendar, follows summer. And they meet very briefly, but they sort of can't believe that they have the same view about this annoying parking lot for this place that they both like to go to. And they feel like, oh my God, fate just delivered my dream girl. Did you hear her talk about the parking lot? And so what I think another way of characterizing what Paul is saying is that we have a tremendous amount of freedom in how we choose to define whether we are similar or dissimilar to somebody. And when people hear a scientist say, look, similarity is not a big predictor, that will be shocking to them because if you ask people, how similar did you feel to John? And then how much did you like John? That is a huge effect. Perceived similarity, the belief that we have tons in common, is a huge predictor of how attracted we are to people. But thus far, when you look at values, at personality, at hobbies, at background, at demographics, social scientists have not been able to find compelling evidence that any of these things that were knowable in advance of two people actually meeting each other, that any of these things actually predicts attraction. What is it about similarity that predicts attraction? That we just decide to focus on those things about our first date or our first month together where the similarities were big and then tell ourselves a story about how fate delivered us somebody who's just like us, but we easily could have interpreted it a different way.
I guess like maybe to shift gears a little though, what about the fixer-upper? Like where this like dramatic change or transformation or makeover occurs. Because I feel like that happens a lot in these movies where someone thinks that you can change someone. What's your take on this with the science?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you've got all of this potential for growth. I think La La Land shows this well because they're both like helping each other grow into their career ambitions. You know, he loves jazz, and rather than seeing it as a deal breaker that she doesn't know anything about jazz, like she comes to like jazz by seeing it through his eyes. So all of that kind of change is a totally realistic depiction of what happens in real relationships. But then you've got the idea that is, I need to make you over to make you hot enough to date the other suitable people, right? That's the clueless idea. That's the Pygmalion idea. I mean, you know, that idea has been around for a very long time that, you know, I can turn you into this other ideal that I have. And I think that places way too much weight on this market idea. The idea like, oh, you're not going to be able to date somebody who's good enough, who's going to make you happy unless you ascend the hierarchy of mate value. And, you know, that is essentially what Cher is doing in that movie. And as funny as it is, it's actually in the end not really in Ty's interest and probably wasn't necessary for Ty to have a happy, healthy relationship. I think with Travis, the skater.
Hey, Paul, I have a question for you about that. So some people might think if only I could build up some musculature or drop 10 pounds or fill in where my hair is balding or whatever it is, that I would have more success on the dating market. There is some truth to that idea, right?
Right. I don't want to totally discount all of these like self-improvement ideas. Like these things are going to be useful. They are exceptionally useful when all you get is a first impression.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that's unfortunate about the dating app culture is that we have fewer places where we are forced, for lack of a better word, to spend time with people in a context that's not necessarily romantic, because you might be a little balding, but with a little bit of time, some people are eventually going to look past that if you are all spending time together. But in the absence of those kinds of social situations that extend forward in time, if all you're getting is first impressions, then yeah, it does play a role.
What about, because this was something I feel like I fell victim to for a while, is that I felt like I could change someone when they told me they weren't fully ready for a relationship and commitment. And I had this like love conquers all mentality. And I think, you know, I had an on again, off again relationship where the person was like, I love you, but like my mental health and other stuff going on, I can't be all in. How would you like look at that from a science perspective?
I call this fostering. She's fostering these stray puppies.
Oh my God.
Social scientists have tried to answer this, and I think they've made some headway, but it's hard to do well. So there are researchers that are studying this idea of commitment readiness. That is, if you only caught people at the right time, then it might have worked. But because you caught them at the wrong time, it didn't work out, right? And there's definitely evidence consistent with that idea that there's individual differences in how ready people are. There's differences across time and how ready an individual is to get involved in something serious. The reason why it's hard to interpret some of those findings is that readiness is sometimes confounded with the people who exist in your social network. You might have thought you weren't very ready, but then like you started to see, as Yue did, like Dave in a new light, and suddenly you're like, maybe I am ready. And so there's like a reverse causality problem of you think that you became ready and therefore were interested in David. But really, David started to hit you in a different light, and therefore you were like, I guess I am ready. But there is truth to this idea that there is fluctuation in readiness, there's individual differences in readiness. Here I'm totally speculating, but I think it's probably hard to convince somebody that they're readier than they think they are. If I'm being very sober about this, and Julie, you asked from a personal perspective, readiness is confounded with the options on the table.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is someone current for you.
No, this is in the past.
She's engaged.
The past.
She's good.
She's engaged to several people who also are not ready. So
She found a forever home.
So my guess, based on the information I have, which is not really precisely relevant to this question, is if somebody's really dragging feet, that's a pretty important signal to listen to. And it may be that they are not ready for anybody. It may be that they're not quite ready for you. But trying to convince them, like, no, you really are ready, seems like a very risky enterprise.
I have some numbers that I can toss behind this. So this comes from some work by Dr. Haddon and his colleagues where they look at relationship readiness. You can think of it like this. Here are 100 people in front of you. Half of them say they're ready and half of them say they're not. And we're going to follow up with them in a few months and see how they're doing. Of the ones who said they were ready, about 22% will be in a relationship a few months later. And about 14% of the ones who said they weren't ready. So 22 versus 14. So that's the space that makes that difference. And it explains why people often have this sense of like, you said you weren't ready.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that big a space, right? Yeah.
Right. It matters what people are saying, but like 14%, some of these people that said they're not ready, they're going to find themselves ready when they come across the right person.
Interesting.
So it's really no such thing as right person, wrong time. The right person comes at the right time, right?
I think we can take that difference to mean something, that there is a subset of people who were more open to something, maybe casting a wider net, maybe, they had more of the blinders off and they did see something. But yes, many people who say I'm not ready will react differently when presented with the option that they want.
For what it's worth, the movies are hit and miss on this stuff. So in The Notebook, for example, Ryan Gosling's character gets heartbroken by Rachel McAdams' character. And then he starts dating this lovely other woman. And he says, like, I'm not going to be able to give you what you want. I'm basically broken. That this breakup with Rachel McAdams has ruined me forever, and I will never be ready for any sort of relationship. So that's a theme that's in there. Of course, it's done in the Nicholas Sparks service of trying to make it even more romantic, the relationship when he gets back together with the Rachel McAdams character. But that strikes me as not that it couldn't ever happen, but as extremely uncharacteristic of how the human psyche works. And even if it feels in the opening hours and weeks and maybe months of a new heartbreak that you could never love anybody again, the large majority of us will somehow find our hearts softening to a new person in the future. So we can make this stuff work when the connection is deep enough. And look, if you haven't just emerged from a trauma, right? It might be that for some number of months after a trauma, you really just can't be there for anyone. That's the exception rather than the rule.
I'd toss up one other important exception here, which is like one very important factor in readiness is, are you dating somebody else? Like that actually is not factoring into the stuff we're talking about, but like that's enormous, right? And a lot of timing is people happen to be single at the same moment in time, right?
Right.
So that's the form of readiness that's like, okay, that has a really big, really big impact.
Kind of related to that readiness, a lot of times in these rom-coms, what culminates then is this grand gesture when someone is ready. Running to the airport when it's raining outside, holding a boombox, declarations of love. I mean, that's like Love Actually. It should have been called Grand Gestures of Love.
You're right.
15 grand gestures.
Just grand gestures. Yeah. Thoughts on that? Research around, do grand gestures actually work?
There's no evidence that anything like that is a good idea. It makes for really good cinema. I mean, I will watch Heath Ledger croon in the stands, daily if I could. But there's really no evidence that these things are a good idea. And often what's actually happening in those moments in these movies is that somebody has said they don't want a thing. Somebody has tried to break something off. Yeah. And the person doing the grand gesture is like, oh, but really though? And generally speaking in real life, that's probably not
a great idea.
Yeah.
And look, one of the things that again comes up in the episodes of Love Factually on purpose, we talk about like, are we okay with this? And we deal with some of the sort of ethical issues confronting the characters or in the messages that these films are sending. And look, it's almost always that the woman or the girl has said no, and the man or the boy has like not taken that for an answer, right? That's what precedes the grand romantic gesture. And in 10 Things I Hate About You, it's very explicit, where the Heath Ledger character is saying to the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character, like, do you love the girl or not? And he's just been rejected. And he's like, well, I thought I did. And then Heath Ledger says, well, don't tell anybody that you don't deserve what you want, or something like that. And it's like, oh my Lord, we have just told a generation of girls and boys that what romance is when she says no, go even bigger.
Right.
Yeah.
And whether that involves hanging from a Ferris wheel, like in The Notebook, or with a boombox, like in Say Anything, you're seeing this again and again and again. And the science supporting the idea that grand romantic gestures in response to somebody saying no to you, there's very little science supporting that idea. So it's one of the messages that we find disconcerting in a lot of these movies.
Well, I'm so glad that we were able to fact check ourselves on this episode, because I mean, I feel like so much of what we've been ingrained in by society, some of it's just wrong expectations that hurts ourselves. And then there's other stuff like we were just talking about that's actually like a huge problem with consent culture and all of the things that have gone even further. So regardless if it's something micro or macro, it's time that we really reevaluate the messages that have come out. I think the other big takeaway I have is like, we're not huge fans of like finding love, that saying, even though in our subtitle that is part of it. And I think part of it is that like creating love just sounds so weird. Like it doesn't have the same ring. It doesn't have like the same ring to it, right? Like it's not like you're finding love, creating love. But I do think we really need to like change the way we think about love. And I loved the conversation we had about compatibility, that it's not just like A plus B equals we're compatible. Like we have to really like build those microcultures that we were talking about. That stuff really hit me, because I know when with my partner, when we first started dating, we would send like these like, and this just sounds so stupid saying this out loud, but like we'd send like every night a kissy face emoji before bed, or like these, and it's like
I witnessed these
little things that like builds up over time though, and it made you feel like you had a connection. And I loved what we're talking about too, about like, you can find the similarities. So it's more about like, are you going to commit to building something with this person, and look at like what that is and how your relationship can grow. That's way more important than if you have the on paper qualities that you think are so important.
When we get to have our next conversation, I'll be really interested in hearing about how these cute emojis you send to each other right before bed, how Yue witnessed them. I want to hear exactly how that happened.
We're in a throuple. That's why.
God bless. There you go. God bless.
And that was my takeaway. Oh, no, but the takeaway is, and really following up on what Julie was saying too, compatibility is built and created. And we put so much emphasis on compatibility being something already given to us, like through the apps that we're able to gauge through photos and profiles, or through how someone describes a person. But you don't know till you meet them and start relating to them in some extent. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect, what I'm hearing is there has to be some commitment to see where things go. It can't just be, let's build compatibility, and if it works, maybe it works. But at some point, maybe like when both people say, well, okay, there is compatibility, there has to be commitment to like, let's see this through. And that's something we're really missing in modern dating. It's like people just don't see it through. They're like, okay,
on to the next.
Let's just see where it goes. On to the next. And the kind of just free-for-all feeling, we don't end up building anything because we don't end up committing to anything.
Yeah. And there's no structures holding us together. There's nothing that's going to make us interact. Again, I use that in sort of the nicest way possible.
Yeah. Okay. So if people want to learn more about you two, where can they go?
Check us out at lovefactuallypod.com. You can also find us at the Love Factually Substack, and subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Love Factually, featuring me, Paul, and Eli.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on our show. For all of our listeners, while you're checking out Love Factually, check out Dateable as well. Give both of us a 5-star rating and review.
Yes.
That really helps both of our podcasts to grow and to bring on amazing guests like Eli and Paul.
And to hear more about compatibility too, and quotes from Paul also, make sure to order our book as well. How to be dateable.
Yes.
How to be dateable.
All right. We're going to wrap up this episode. Stay